Good afternoon, Facebook land. This is Kim McCarthy. I am running for state representative in District 73 here in Greene County. That includes the cities of Fairborn, Beavercreek, Bellbrook, and Yellow Springs. We've had issues with our live stream today, so I'm recording this session and we'll upload it to Facebook as soon as we're done. So thank you for understanding. It's only the second time this has happened over these last few months, so I guess that's better than nothing. So anyway, I always like to start out with a quick update. Again, if you'd like to get involved in the campaign, we have yard signs for you. You can do postcards, send them out to your friends. We are doing lit drops on Sunday. This Sunday, we're going to be in Fairborn at noon, if you'd like to join us. And then on Saturday afternoons, we do street rallies. So they're always fun. You get to hang out with like-minded folks. They are socially distanced and masked events. We are doing them at 1 o'clock in Bellbrook, 2 o'clock in Beavercreek, and 3 o'clock in Fairborn. So if you're interested in doing any or all of the things I just mentioned, send off an email to vote@kimmccarthyoh.com and we will hook you up. We also have Facebook events on the page you can see as well. So, yes, less than 40 days, I think, to the election. It's getting intense. And I just wanted to start out today with an apology of sorts. It has been brought to my attention that some of the things I said during the Dayton Daily News candidate interview that came out in the paper on Monday have offended some people. And frankly, that makes me beyond sad. And it's certainly not what I was intending. But just to explain the situation a little, I made reference to the fact that I have learned over the course of not just this campaign, but the 2008 campaign, that military families, when they come to this area, we're choosing areas based on schools and the state ranking that the state gives each school. Now, that conversation about the school ranking is another entire issue. As imperfect as that scoring is, it is the scale, it is what parents look to when deciding where they want to live and what school they want their children to go to. So in District 73, like I mentioned, we have 4 school districts: Yellow Springs, Fairborn, Beavercreek, and Bellbrook. And amongst those 4, Fairborn is the lowest rank school out of the four of them in the A, B, C, D, E, F categories that they give them. So I used a really insensitive term and said weakest, and I apologize for that. That's not a good description of Fairborn schools. I have been following them over the last few years. I know that they have improved greatly. They were an F when I ran the first time. They're now a C. And, this has nothing to do, my statement has nothing to do with the effort of the teachers, the children, the administration of that school. The issue lies with the state funding formula that does not give our schools adequate funding to ensure all of our kids have a good education. Now, I have learned that, the military families right now, the major schools that they look for, and some of these families come in and sight unseen buy houses in districts. It's Bellbrook, where I live, Springboro, and Carriage Hill. Now, that excludes 3 of the 4 schools in District 73. And Bellbrook, of course, is going through huge turmoil right now, and we've had to cut all kinds of things from our schooling curriculum. So it won't be long before Bellbrook falls off that list as well. So, I spoke with the superintendents in 2018 at all of the school districts across the region, across the district. And, these are the things they're telling me, that people are avoiding certain schools because they want their kids to get the best possible opportunity. And that should not happen. We should have an equitable funding system where people can live in any community they want, and their kids won't be disadvantaged by that. So I hope that clarifies a little of what I was trying to say. I apologize for the crassness or the harshness of the term that came out of my mouth in that verbal interview. Sometimes I don't think properly before I speak, but, you know, what I was trying to make clear was that, you know, we need a better school funding formula that funds all of the schools in an adequate way, so people don't have to pick and choose and drive all the way to Springboro out of our district for their children to get a good education. Fairborn has made great strides in the last few years, and I'm really proud of them for doing that. So I hope that helps clarify what I was trying to say. All right, so before I bring on our guest, there was one more thing I wanted to talk about. In the last week, we've actually had, I've had some, well, Mr. Lampton was also interviewed, so I saw his answers there. And we have a mailer that should have ended up in mailboxes, and do I have it here? No, I wanted to, I was going to bring oh, here it is. So we put a mailer out into people's mailboxes for the first time this week. And, you know, on the back here, this is me. And on the back here, the question is, why did Brian Lampton take Larry Householder's dirty money? Because that is the question we want answered. And it's the question that Brian Lampton himself has not answered. So, you know, I'm running for this seat because previous reps have been a part of this one-party rule that breeds this corruption and prevents the actual issues like school funding from being addressed. You know, 20 years it's been ruled unconstitutional, no remedy as yet. So I'm running because I care about our communities, and I want to see better public policy address these problems. So, you know, this question, why did he take the money? He has had ample opportunity to address this, but he's refusing to answer people's questions. If he doesn't understand how this kind of money works in Columbus, then perhaps he is not suited for this role. Householder was under investigation by the FBI the last time he was Speaker of the House. It was widely known that Larry Householder was not someone you wanted to get into bed with. Now, I spoke with a local Greene County elected official on the weekend. We spoke about my campaign, and without naming names, he actually said, you know, why would you take money from Larry Householder? Everyone knew he was shady. That is our question we want answered. So look, you know, people tell me Brian Lampton is a nice guy, and I can see that's probably true. But we don't need a nice guy representing us in Columbus, in a place where people are vying for your vote in ways that is detrimental to the people you're elected to serve. Money and its influence in our politics has caused so much damage, and it's corrupted our system, as evidenced by this HB6 scandal. And Mr. Lampton put himself into the middle of that influence, whether he meant to or not. It shows a severe lack of judgment on his behalf, and indicates he's not up to the task of standing strong against the establishment that has caused so much harm to Ohioans. So his recent answer in the Dayton Daily News this week regarding whether he's for or against the repeal of HB6 further shows a lack of understanding about the seat that he's running for. He said he didn't know enough about it to say. This is the largest criminal bribery scheme in Ohio's history, perpetrated by people who funded and ran his campaign, yet he hasn't taken the time to familiarize himself with the bill. For the record, I am for a full repeal. So, you know, I'm not here to hurt Mr. Lampton's feelings or disparage him personally, but for me, all of the children at Fairborn schools matter more to me than not offending him. The kids in Bellbrook schools, the kids in Fairborn, Yellow Springs, Beavercreek, and the children that are coming after them, they matter more to me than Mr. Lampton's feelings. I am here to show that the political choices he has made before he's even set foot in office were wrong. And they go against everything that I personally stand for. We have to get money out of politics, not use it to further our own positions. And, you know, as far as him giving the money back, if you get caught with your hand in the cookie jar, whether you eat the cookie or put it back, you have still been caught with your hand in the cookie jar. Giving a portion of that dirty money to charity doesn't answer the question of why you took the money in the first place and what was required of you for taking that money. He hasn't answered that. He hasn't even told us where he's donated the money to. So we don't need to see or wait to see what Mr. Lampton will do once he's elected. He's already shown us. We deserve better than this. We deserve someone who is dedicated to fighting for the people, not for special interests. Our communities are in trouble right now, and we must work together to fix our schools, expand healthcare, address climate change, and get good paying jobs into Ohio that allow people to live a life with dignity. We are in the middle of an economic depression caused by the COVID pandemic, and we need all hands on deck to help people through this time. Your vote for me in November will be a step in the right direction for Ohio. All right, enough of that. Let's welcome our guest. Let me bring in Mr. Eric Parkman.
Hey, Kim.
Hi, Eric. Welcome to my front porch.
Thank you very much.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
Good, good. All right, well, let me just read a little intro on Eric for everyone. Like I said on Facebook, he's from Sugar Creek Township, the same area that I live in, and he is the president and co-founder of 46 Brooklyn Research, a nonprofit that uses data to educate the public on drug pricing and the drug supply chain. Eric is also the president and founder of 3 Access Advisors, a consultancy that assists clients in exposing and ending the inequities and inefficiencies in the US drug supply chain. That's quite a mission, Eric.
We're trying.
That's a big
it's a struggle, one. But yeah, we're trying each and every day.
I'm sure. All right, one little bit more. Before these 2 ventures, he ran a mid-sized chain of community pharmacies based in Dayton. And it was in this role that he found and exposed hundreds of millions of dollars of waste in Ohio's Medicaid program. He has a Bachelor of Science in Chemical Engineering from the University of Florida and an MBA from Harvard Business School. Very impressive.
Thank you. Thanks so much. It's great to be here again.
Good, good. All right, well, let's just get straight into it. So I guess the number 1 question we want to start with is, why does the US have a drug pricing problem? Well, why are we different from other countries, right? Because I know, just to talk about my situation for 1 second before we start, my son is on a medication that is about $5,500 a month here, and back in my home country of Australia, $250 a month.
Did you check that on our website?
No, but I will. I will. I just did a simple Google, but if you have that info on your website, I will double check it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's such a random coincidence, because when we met, for the last 3 months before we met, my colleague was working a study of Australian drug prices. And not even just, his name is Ben, not even just a study of the drug prices, because the database is all transparent and public, but he was actually going and reading through, like, how exactly does the system work? Like, how does a well-functioning universal health care, Medicare for all type of system actually work? And so, and then we ran into you, and I'm like, oh my God, this is just too funny. And so you can confirm or deny some of the things I'll tell you. So first, like, let's start with, it was actually an amazing relation for me, because I've been spending the past 2 years trying to dissect this, like, mess of a system. It is so amazingly complex, like nothing I've ever seen, and I've seen lots of different industries. So many, like, middlemen companies that are feeding off the system, and everybody trying to fool everybody else. And I'm like, well, this is, I must be pretty smart. This is a hard, thing to solve. And then we look at Australia. And I felt like such a goofball, or I felt so stupid, because I'm like, this is not challenging at all. Like, this is so simple. I mean, now actually enacting change, that becomes a cultural thing, right? I mean, like, I'm not sure if, like, as Americans, we can actually accept something like they're doing over there, but, like, let's just talk about, like, the math and the science and, like, the design of it. It's so simple. Government provides universal healthcare coverage. Government is responsible for deciding you know, hey, these drugs have amazing clinical benefits and are actually affordable, or if they're not, we are going to go directly to those manufacturers and we are going to negotiate deals because they are going to improve the quality of life of our population. And then there are lots of drugs, as you know, we may get into talking about, but like, just trust me, there are tons of drugs that are thrown upon the marketplace, especially in the US, which are horrible drugs. Like they have absolutely no benefit relative to other alternatives. Yet, because of the way the U.S. marketplace works, like we'll just take it all, and there's really no one to protect the Americans from that. So the Australian government is actually doing that on behalf of the population, and because of that, they've designed basically like they're like the bouncer to the club, you know. And so you can only get into the club if you actually are going to provide a lot of value, and then they also negotiate really great discounts. And so we found that, you know, the average brand drug, which is what most people are complaining about here, not generic drugs, is probably 80 to 90% cheaper in Australia than it is in the US. And that's for a population, 25 million, 30 million. I mean, we're talking about the 10th the size or less than that of this country. And so it makes you wonder, like, how did we go so wrong? And so in prepping for this, I was thinking about, like, what are the characteristics of Australia versus characteristics here of healthcare? There, healthcare is first and foremost about universal coverage, and secondly, a business. Here, it is a business, first and foremost, 100%, hospital, pharmacy, whatever you want to talk about. And then really there is no such thing as universal coverage here, right? But I mean,
Right.
we increase people's quality of life, everything, but it's a business first, let's be clear. Over there, you can just go on the website, which is all we did. We don't have any special access to data, you know, in Australia. We just went on and downloaded all their data, you know? And so we have all their prices. We know what everyone gets paid across the supply chain. We know what the wholesalers get paid. We know what the retail pharmacies get paid. We know exactly what a patient is going to pay when they show up. We got to convert it from Australian dollars to US dollars, but we know all of that. It is perfect transparency. And so you have these two important factors, that it's not a business first and foremost. It's about actually, you know, covering the population, and there's transparency. And here it's the exact opposite. So here it's a business first and foremost, and then it's about hiding all of the information. It's about opacity, not about transparency. And the problem with that, like if it was one or the other, it actually wouldn't be as bad as it is right now. But like if you, like an uber capitalistic society, a bunch of hidden data, what do you think is going to happen? The people that own that data and that can use that data for their benefit are going to do exactly that, because they got shareholders and they got, you know, venture capital and private equity, and like all the people that are looking to make money, they have them to appease. And so that is exactly what has happened here. Basically, there's been a wedge driven between what drugs really cost, which we see and we've been researching for the last couple, and what you see. What they really cost is pretty much what you're paying in Australia, you know? There's been a wedge between that and what we're subjected to as far as the upper end list price of the drugs, and that has been driven by really just the opacity of the marketplace. And there's been tons of companies, it's like an alphabet soup, PBM, PSAO, it doesn't really matter what all of them mean. There's lots and lots of middlemen that have like jumped into the fray within the prescription drug supply chain, and they're all off of the lack of transparency within the system, and then ultimately driving that wedge between our prices and other countries' prices greater and greater. So I know this is all really complicated. That's really as simple as I can make it, except 46 Brooklyn, we always try to bring analogies in, because and we try to, by the way, all of our writing, all of our work is free to the public, just 46brooklyn.com. We do a lot of cool data visualizations, including the Australia one. But we try to bring analogies in. So I was thinking about like, what's a really good analogy? And I think grocery store shopping is a good one. So my kids just had mac and cheese last night, so I got mac and cheese on the mind. And so let's assume that you want to go buy mac and cheese for your kids and make them happy. You walk into a Kroger and you go to the aisle and you have like 6, 7, 10, 15 different options on the aisle. You can buy the brand name Kraft, or you can buy the store brand Kroger, the generic version Kroger, or you can buy any different other brand or whatever you want. The price is there on every single one of them, and you can make a judgment, which probably you don't even consciously think about which one am I going to pick off the shelf put in my cart, and walk out. Now, if you're white, you're black, it doesn't matter what race you are, you come in, you get the same exact price. It doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, you get the same price. It doesn't matter if you're a small employer, you're employed by a large employer, if you're on Medicaid, if you're on you get the same price. Now, there are the discount programs that Kroger has, right? We'll put that to the side for the time being.
Okay.
Then you can get that too. And so that's the way. Now, groceries are a business. It's a business. They're in there to make money, but there's transparency in groceries. And so that's the reason why all of this competition in the grocery market has actually driven prices down to where mac and cheese is really, really inexpensive. Let's assume that there was no transparency in groceries. Then it would be much like the prescription market. So you walk into Kroger looking to get mac and cheese, you go to the aisle, there are 7 different options, no prices anywhere. You have no clue what they cost. So you guess and you take the Kraft brand, or maybe you take the generic Kroger brand. You go to the cashier and you check out and you give them a card that basically has a whole slew of numbers on it, you know, that tells them what, you know, I am on Medicaid, I am on Medicare, I am on commercial insurance, my employer insures me. And then depending on what numbers they enter in, that price could come up anywhere from, let's say that a box of mac and cheese should cost $1.50. That price could come up anywhere from $1, $1.50 to $150. And those are real numbers when it comes to the scale of the abuse within prescription drugs. And then say you get you choose to take the Kraft stuff, you know, that rings up, you'll never see the price. That's probably $150 to $200 per box. But more than likely, your employer or the Medicaid department is getting a giant rebate of like $125. They're getting a big discount after the fact, of which you'll never see any of that money, because you actually had to give a copay at the register for $25 or $30 or $50 or whatever, and you have no idea that a box of cheese should cost $1.50. And this
oh my gosh.
I mean, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? But this is exactly how it is. Like when you actually go to the pharmacy and you get a bottle of, or 30 count of mental health prescription, call it like generic Abilify or something, like that is basically the cost. It costs about the same amount as a box of macaroni and cheese. But if you actually went to pay with cash, you could be charged $150, $200 for that.
Right.
And so this is really not that ridiculous. This is the world we would be living in if everything was opaque and there was absolutely no transparency.
Oh, that makes my head spin. All right. Well, yeah. And I think, have you read that book by T.R. Reid? About healthcare systems around the world?
I have not, but I'm going to write this down right now.
Yeah, it's T.R. Reid, R-E-I-D.
Okay.
Yeah, healthcare. It's basically an examination of, I think, 6 or 7 different healthcare systems across the world. And it lays out the 4 different kinds of single payer systems that exist and the pros and cons of them. But what I got the most out of that book was saying, you know, you're talking about it being a business. The massive point I got was that none of these countries switched to a universal system until the population believed as a whole that it was a human right for everyone to receive it. They were never convinced by cost savings. It was always driven by this moral stance that they decided people deserve health care. So, yeah, I guess we're still waiting for that here.
I think the irony is that, like, most people believe that would be more expensive, though. And then what other countries are now showing us, or like is opening our eyes, is that it's actually a lot cheaper. And it's mostly because countries are able to do, you know, science-based assessments of like which drugs are very, very helpful to the population to increase lifespan, to improve outcomes, so on and so forth. And how do we block or restrict access to drugs that are really abusive drugs, is what I'd call them. I mean, there are examples of drugs, and these are real examples of where you take 2 generic medications that are over the counter that you can, you know, walk into your local Kroger or Target or whatever, pick them up over the counter. They've just taken them together and put them to what's called a combination drug, and they're charging hundreds of dollars per pill, you know, for them. And there's no restrictions to doing that kind of stuff here, whereas other countries have said, well, that doesn't make any sense.
Right,
You know,
right.
yes, I would rather take one pill than two, but if it's going to cost pennies versus $100, like, no, we're
Right.
going to be smart about this, and we're going to just put two pills in our mouth rather than one,
Right.
until they're willing to give us a fair price on the combination drug. There is a
Right.
little bit of benefit in putting the two together, but not $100 a pill,
Sure,
right?
sure. Yeah, and I guess this is where the pharmaceutical lobbyists come in with influencing our government and obviously their stance towards reducing those prices.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's keep moving. So I guess the next thing I'm going to ask is what went wrong in Ohio?
Yeah.
So there was a scam kind of that you uncovered?
I wouldn't say it was a scam. I mean, the problem is it's all legal. Like what was going on.
Okay.
It all totally is just taking abuse of the opacity of the system, or taking advantage of how little information is actually out there and available. So it's a really good example that ties into kind of the things that we were talking about before. You know, one, the opacity that's going on. Nobody really knows what the prices are. This is an extreme example of that within Ohio. And the other thing that I actually forgot to mention is another problem that I think we've had in this country, and it's really only a problem because of the other two things, the healthcare as a business and the opacity, is that most healthcare, and especially on prescription drugs, is basically someone else is paying for you. You know, you're making decisions with other people's money, and so that was really the case up until deductible plans came about, right? I mean, think about 10, 15 years ago. It didn't matter what something cost. I just show up and I pay a copay and I move on. I don't care if my employer is getting charged $1,000. Now, that actually is going to come back and hurt me because the next year my premiums are going to go up. That's the dirty little secret. But this example also has to do with people's money. So Ohio Medicaid, that's 100% other people's money. You know, patients are really paying next to nothing as far as copays because it's a low-income program. It's all taxpayer funded for the most part, whether it be part state and then part federal. So when I was managing pharmacies, as you talked about, right after I came on board to the pharmacy chain, there was a massive cut in what we were receiving for drugs that actually brought us to below our cost to even acquire them, let alone pay the pharmacist, keep the lights on, pay the technicians. So that happened, and it mostly happened within, or almost exclusively happened within, the Ohio Medicaid program. And just a little bit more detail, Ohio has two types, or all Medicaid programs, almost all, have two types. One that's run by the state, where the state is directly responsible. Now, they may hire some people to come in and assist them, but they're directly responsible for administering the Medicaid program. The other kind is called managed care. And that's where the state says, I don't want it. I'm going to go hire a bunch of insurance companies, like these large insurance companies, and I'm just going to pay them a premium. I'm going to pay them a flat rate to go do this, if the problem is theirs. So we started seeing all these really large reimbursement cuts on the managed care side, where the state was like, let them go do it. So fast forward a couple of years after, like, I'm pulling all my hair out, my hair is turning gray, which, you know, that's all happened by now. And, you know, we're trying to keep the pharmacies afloat and everything because the reimbursements were getting cut so much. And we finally got a hold of somebody within the Ohio Medicaid department. And it was a data analyst. So, like, I'm a data nerd, she was a data nerd. It was awesome. And so I was like, look, you know, I will basically work with you to understand, like, I don't want to see what, you know, your side of the data says and what you guys are paying, but I will show you what, or I'll give you what we're paying, because ultimately this is the state's responsibility. So I'll go ahead and give you that, and I'll give you all the information that you need to match up these claims one by one. And then really what should happen is it should match. It should say the state paid X, the pharmacy received X, and then, you know, the middlemen and all the people should get a fee in the middle for their services, right? Well, she did all this matching up, and we're talking about tens of thousands of claims. We're not talking about a couple here. She did all the matching up of these claims, and there were some, actually a lot, where the state paid $2,000, the pharmacy received $20. The state paid $500, the pharmacy received $15. And it was just random. I mean, but it added up to a huge amount of what's called spread. And the reason why this happens, this is all lawyers, right? All lawyers and contracts. So the middleman, called the pharmacy benefit manager, they're the ones that's sitting in the middle. They have a whole bunch of contracts with the insurance companies, and they say, I'm allowed to charge you some number, right? That's what the drugs cost. And then they go sign contracts with the pharmacies as well, totally different contracts, and they say, I'm allowed to pay you some number. And then just there's no transparency around what anything costs. Everything is all aggregated up and obfuscated and everything, and then there just becomes this giant number in the middle that this independent third party was able to retain. Turns out that number ended up being over $240 million, in 1 year for Ohio. And so we were just seeing the tip of the iceberg of it. We had proven that it was actually happening systematically. And going even a little bit farther, when we were talking to the Medicaid department, they didn't even know that the data that was in their system didn't reflect. Like, they thought that data in their system reflected what the pharmacies received, but they were being fed numbers that didn't even reflect what the pharmacies received. They were being fed fake numbers that they were getting charged. And so this became this whole spread pricing kind of, it's become like a nationwide movement almost to ban spread pricing. It's been put into bills that have been, just really kind of sitting stale at this point in time, but hopefully we'll get like re-energized next year. And so this is just one example of how, when nobody's watching and ultimately these companies are in it to make money, the state doesn't have an eye out for this. Like, they're just going to take advantage of like whatever you give them to take advantage of. And so it ends up being a lot of money. And we went on, and I actually left the pharmacy before that came out, because I realized that I just wanted to help other states identify and find this as well, because I knew Ohio was not the only other one. And so we have since found this in New York. There are other states that have identified it themselves, such as Kentucky, South Carolina. We found it in Michigan. There's even some instances in Florida. I mean, it's pretty widespread at this point in time. So that's what happened. Again, not a scam, totally legal, but it should not be happening. I mean, there shouldn't be an ability for an intermediary to abuse the privilege that it has to manage this on behalf of the state, to sign hidden proprietary contracts with two different parties and then basically exploit and keep all the money in the middle. And that's exactly what happened.
So it's legal for them to give fake numbers to the state?
They're not fake numbers. As their contracts,
I thought you said they gave fake
they're fake. They are fake numbers relative to the actual price of the drug. Our contracts give them the leeway to make up these numbers.
Okay.
So,
wow.
So long that they stay, this is more detail than you want, but so long as they stay within these overall broad-reaching contractual obligations that they have, for each individual transaction, that does not have to be a real number that they actually bill to the state. It can be whatever they want.
All right, so this happened in what, 2018 you were doing this work? You started doing it?
Yeah, well, it really started heating up, and we started finding it towards the latter part of 16. It really occurred. The worst of it started hitting pharmacies in 2016. 2017 was a long, hard slog. Me learning a lot about Columbus and how difficult it is to affect change there. And then once you get into 2018, that's when things started really moving, and when I left in order to focus on this.
All right, so what's happened in Ohio then? I mean, is this sort of thing, I mean, I saw that the Attorney General did an audit on it.
That's what we're talking about. That was fantastic. They audited. It was the first time that any state had done a full audit on spread pricing. So kudos to Ohio for doing that, and the Attorney General. But since then, I mean, this is purely my opinion. Ohio has really gotten too cute with this whole thing. So Columbus is very upset about what's going on. There's a committee called the Joint Medicaid Oversight Committee. They've really been fantastic about really calling Medicaid to the carpet and giving them a hard time. There's been turnover within the Medicaid department. I mean, people have taken the fall for this, but we're still no closer to a solution here or we're not close enough to a solution relative to how much time has actually passed. And the reason why is because, remember we talked initially about the state can actually run the Medicaid prescription, management program, or they can let the insurers do it. Well, for whatever reason, Ohio does not want to take this away from these large insurers. And so they're trying to do this very creative, complicated program where they blend the two of them together. So they say, well, we want this to act and look and smell and feel like a state-run program, but we still want these private insurers with like one PBM to actually run this. And the problem is they're finding out that this is kind of like a unicorn trying to create this thing that nobody's ever created before, whereas other states like New York that have identified the problem, they just said, forget it. We're moving everything to state run. We're firing the insurers. We're firing the pharmacy. We don't want any middlemen anymore between us and the providers that are providing care to our Medicaid population. And they're actually finding that there's cost savings there too. So the providers can actually get paid more and the state can actually save money. So I just don't like complexity. I've battled complexity my entire life. I battled complexity until Australia opened my eyes within the prescription drug supply chain. And so my advice is keep it simple, stupid, and the what's called a carve out, which is basically just shifting it all over so the state can actually run it, is probably the best way to ensure that you're at least going to remove all this opacity, bring some transparency to the program, and then make sure that you can actually track the flow of all these dollars and have some control over the program.
Right, yeah, and save our tax dollars, right? I mean, because these are our tax dollars that are going into somebody's pocket. And, Medicaid is a massive portion of the Ohio state budget. Yep. That, along with schools and, of course, our jails, it's up there. All right, so if people are disturbed by what they've just learned, how can they put pressure? I guess contacting that Joint Medicaid Oversight Committee? Can we reach out to them and suggest that they get rid of the middleman and run it ourselves?
I think so. I mean, you could try them. I mean, I think that this has been such a hot button topic within Ohio because, I mean, to Ohio's credit, they were first to uncover this. And, the Columbus Dispatch was they've written over 100 articles on this. So if anyone wants to learn more, please go out, support the Columbus Dispatch, and read all the wonderful reporting that they've done about this problem. But yeah, I would say like really any of your representatives, senators should know about this. And, we're happy to help educate them on this. I mean, I think our role is just the educational part of this and how difficult one will be over another. Like we don't necessarily advocate for anything, but we can at least help provide the education to understand what are the sources of savings in one versus the other, what are the difficulties and challenges in one versus the other. So yeah, I mean, I'd say any of your state reps or senators should be up to speed on what's going on with the PBM spread world.
Sure. All right, well, we'll put your websites in the link under the video when we get that up there too, so people can check that out further if they have interest.
Yeah.
All right, anything else you want to wrap up with before we say goodbye, Eric? Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I just wanted to thank you for having me, and if hopefully this was clear enough. It's taken me the better part of 2 years to even get to the point where I think I can communicate this within 20 minutes.
Yeah.
And I have to thank your home country for opening our eyes to that. It's given me a lot of optimism that if we do tackle some of the cultural issues that we have here, it's definitely possible for us to have a much better, more inclusive, more equal system that really will provide cheaper coverage to everybody.
Yeah. Well, now you understand why I'm such a huge proponent for it, right? I'm like,
yes.
I didn't even realize when I moved here, I was like, what is this system? I mean, talk about taking it for granted. I figured everyone had a universal health care. It took me a while to understand exactly what was going on here. But anyway. All right. Well, thank you, Eric. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate it was a clear description and nice analogies to help us understand as well. So yeah, thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me.
Bye. All right. You're welcome. Bye. All right. Well, thank you to Eric Bachman again. I will put the website links for him under the video when we get it uploaded.
So again, sorry for the technical difficulties, but yeah, that's it for today. Next week, I think this is going to be my last week of having guests on, unless something else comes up that I really want to share with you. I want to dedicate the last few weeks before the election to just really focusing in on the main components of my campaign, what my priorities will be if elected. I think HB6 is another huge component because environmental justice is a part of my campaign, and HB6 here in Ohio is really relevant to that. So yeah, if you have questions, this is going to be, I'll be straight on Facebook, not Zoom. So we'll be able to interact and we can have some back and forth and it'll be a fine time. So we will see you next Friday for that. But until then, enjoy your evening. It's a beautiful day out there. Enjoy your weekend and we'll see you next time. Thank you.